Welcome, if that's the word, to another miserable morning in medieval Europe. Picture this, you, yes you, blinking awake in the pre-dawn gloom as the world outside your ramshackle hut shivers under a damp grey sky. I should know. I've floated through more of these mornings than I care to count, and let me assure you, no one's ever woken up here with a smile. Before we get going, do the living thing and hit like subscribe if you're entertained by suffering, and tell me in the comments where you're haunting from and what ungodly hour you're watching at. I'll be here, as always, lurking just out of sight. Let's begin. You wake up not to birdsong or a gentle sunrise, but to the thunderous clang of the church bell. Medieval Europe's idea of a snooze button is a bell that sounds like it's tolling for your soul. You're sprawled on a straw mattress that's more pest hotel than bed. The straw's half rotted, the hay pokes through, and the entire thing smells like the inside of a livestock pen because in fact it was. There's no memory foam, no pillow, and certainly no thread count to brag about. Your only blanket is a slab of coarse wool stiff with last winter's sweat, mud and a patchwork of stains best left unidentified. The air bites at your skin as you stretch, every joint crackling like a haunted door. You're all of 30, practically geriatric here. Your spine protests, your knees mutiny, and your whole body reminds you that comfort is a foreign concept. As you force yourself upright, your feet sink into a floor that's either slick with rain from the leaky thatch or crusty with whatever the chickens contributed overnight. In either case, your toes are now part of the habitat. Welcome to communal living, where privacy is a myth, and everyone, including that cousin who never leaves, wakes up inches from your face. No doors, no curtains, just a single open room where family, livestock, and an army of fleas share the morning air. The smell? Oh, it's a masterpiece. Imagine a bouquet of stale ale, human funk, goat, and that pungent undertone of rot that you hope is only mildew. Scented candles? Please. You're lucky if the breeze wafting through a gap in the wall doesn't bring in even more fragrant surprises. I've lingered here centuries, and trust me, no amount of nose blindness will save you. The medieval morning is a full sensory assault. You try to find a moment to yourself but forget about alone time. Someone's always watching, whether it's your 6 siblings, your grandmother, or the family dog, all breathing in unison. Even the lice seem to prefer company. You're never truly alone. Solitude is for saints and outlaws. It's a communal symphony of coughs, groans, and the occasional goat bleat. So, you've managed to peel yourself off your bug-ridden mattress. Congratulations. Now nature calls, and it's not sending a polite invitation. In this era, answering that call is less a routine and more a public spectacle. No bathroom, no toilet, no privacy. Your options are a wooden bucket that's already seen better days. Or, if you're feeling adventurous, a brisk walk to the back of the house, assuming you don't slip in the mud or something worse. That bucket? Already overflowing thanks to Uncle Wolfston's digestive misadventures. The stench rises like a curse. You do your business grimacing, and then here's the highlight. You toss it into the street. That's right. Medieval waste management is just a matter of flinging it onto the road and yelling something like Gardilou, which in Old French means look out below, not that anyone ever moves fast enough. The streets are open sewers, a fetid river of human and animal waste, mystery fluids, and the occasional lost shoe. I've watched more than one unfortunate soul slip and faceplant into humanity's leftovers. If you're in a town with public latrines, well, brace yourself. It's shoulder-to-shoulder camaraderie with strangers, all perched above a communal pit, with ventilation that's purely theoretical. Privacy, only in your dreams. Small talk is risky. Every deep breath is a gamble. No toilet paper, of course. Most people wipe with whatever's on hand. Straw, moss, rags, or if you're feeling extravagant, a scrap of wool. Sometimes, nothing at all, which might explain why handshakes haven't caught on. Maybe you're nobility, living in a castle. Surely it's better there. Well, you get a guardrobe, a hole in the wall that drops your waist straight into the moat. Ingenious, until you realize that enemies sometimes sneak in through the waist chute. Nothing says medieval siege like an invader popping up from the latrine. It's a humiliation ritual for all classes. Cold, public, dangerous, and always disgusting. I've seen more than one proud knight slip on a wet stone and tumble into the abyss. It's a miracle anyone survived their own bathroom. With that ordeal behind you, if you're lucky, you stagger back inside to contemplate breakfast. Don't expect to feast. There's no coffee brewing, no bacon sizzling, not even a crusty croissant in sight. Instead, you gather around a dying fire, huddling for warmth, and eye a wooden bowl filled with pottage. Pottage is less a meal and more a lifestyle. A thick, murky stew of grains, root vegetables, and whatever scraps haven't spoiled. It's been simmering for days, maybe weeks. New ingredients are just layered on top, a culinary experiment gone rogue. Beside your pottage is a hunk of bread so dense it could serve as a weapon. It's made from coarse rye or barley, often mixed with sawdust, acorns, or whatever fillers available, because wheat is for the elite. This bread isn't sliced, it's negotiated with. You gnaw at it, hoping not to break a tooth. I've seen loaves outlast entire families. As for drinks, forget orange juice or oat milk. You're sipping weak ale. Yes, even at sunrise. Why? Because the water is a microbial death trap, crawling with parasites and filth. So everyone, kids included, starts the day with beer. It's low on alcohol, high on survival. No one enjoys it, but at least it won't kill you immediately, unlike that suspicious puddle outside. Dreaming of meat or cheese? Keep dreaming. That's for saints' days and feasts, and only if your lord is feeling generous. Most peasants taste meat a few times a year, if that. Fresh fruit is rare and seasonal. More often it's fermented into wine before you ever see it. Spices? A pinch of pepper costs more than your monthly income. Salt is so precious it's locked up tight, so you chew your gritty bread, gulp your medieval beer, and try not to think about the rat that may have nibbled your pottage overnight. Breakfast isn't nourishing, it's something that happens to you. You don't finish it, you endure it. The taste is bland at best, gritty at worst, and there's always the possibility of a surprise ingredient. Every bite is a reminder that comfort is for the afterlife, not for the living. And yet somehow you keep going. Human endurance is a stubborn, miraculous thing. By now, you're cold, hungry, and vaguely sticky. But there's no time to wallow. The day waits for no one, especially not a medieval peasant. The sun is barely up, but you're already late by the standards of an age where survival is a full-time job. Your body aches, your stomach grumbles, and you glance longingly at your bug-ridden mattress, already dreading the night ahead. And that, dear viewer, is just the beginning. You haven't even started work, changed clothes, or faced the endless parade of chores that define medieval existence. The day promises little in the way of comfort, and plenty of opportunity for new creative suffering. I'll be right here with you, floating alongside, offering dry commentary as you lurch from one ordeal to the next. So, as you scrape the last bit of pottage from your bowl and wipe your hands on your already filthy tunic, take a moment to appreciate your modern plumbing, central heating, and the miracle of breakfast cereal. In medieval Europe, you'd be lucky to survive till noon, but don't get too comfortable. Your day's just begun. And with that, let's drag ourselves to the next indignity. So you've eaten your sad medieval breakfast, and now it's time to get dressed. If you thought mornings were rough, just wait until you see what passes for clothing and labour in this era. Trust me, you're not ready, but we're going anyway. So, here you are, fresh from your flavourless medieval breakfast, standing in the clammy half-light of your hut, preparing to don the one ensemble you own. Don't get too excited. Your wardrobe is the stuff of nightmares. A single scratchy wool tunic, or if fortune has smiled ever so slightly, a linen shift. Seasonal fashion? Please. The only season your outfit knows is eternal suffering. You wear it day after day, month after month, until it transforms into a stiff, reeking relic, or if you're lucky, simply fuses to your skin. Underwear exists in theory, but in practice, you're more likely to go commando, wrapped in layers of sweat-salted wool, lovingly stitched by someone who probably used a fishbone for a needle and a prayer for thread. Laundry day, you ask? Oh, sweet summer child. There's no soap, no washing machine, not even a communal river party. If you want clean clothes, you'll need to haul buckets of muddy water, heat it over a smoky fire, scrub your tunic with ashes or lye, and hope the sun comes out before the next downpour. And if you're not careful, you'll just end up with a garment that's both wet and dirtier than when you started. Stains are badges of honour, and the scent. Imagine compost left to ferment in a pigsty with just a hint of despair. That's your signature aroma. Shoes. Let's not get carried away. If you possess any, they're little more than slabs of untreated leather, barely stitched together and about as waterproof as cheesecloth. Most peasants just go barefoot, squelching through mud, manure and whatever sharp disease-laced surprises the path has to offer. Think of it as a daily exfoliation you never asked for. Arch support is a foreign concept. Your soles are as battered as your spirit. And if you're wondering about socks, go ahead and keep wondering. Now, let's talk about your skin. It hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice and bedbugs are your ever-present companions, moving in and setting up shop in your hair, your sleeves, and all the places you'd rather not mention, nobles, monks, squirming toddlers, no one escapes the medieval wildlife. You'll be scratching your armpit with a wooden spoon while discussing salvation with the priest, and no one will so much as raise an eyebrow. It's just another day in paradise. Your scalp is a war zone of bites and scabs, your skin raw from endless scratching. If you develop a rash, congratulations, it's your new best friend for the next 6 months. There's no dermatologist, no hydrocortisone, no one to tell you it's probably scabies. You simply endure, hoping the rash doesn't turn into something worse. And if you're lucky enough to avoid infection, you'll just be slightly less miserable than your neighbor. Now that you're dressed in misery, let's move on to your smile, or what's left of it. Flashing your teeth is a dangerous game in the Middle Ages, and not for emotional reasons. Dental hygiene is a foreign concept. Toothbrushes, toothpaste, not even a rumor. If you're feeling fancy, you might chew on a twig or rinse your mouth with a bit of vinegar or wine, but mostly, your teeth are left to fend for themselves in a hostile environment. By your mid-30s, your mouth resembles a haunted crypt. Cavities are rampant, gums are swollen, and every brownish stain is just another patch of decay. Sugar is rare, mostly reserved for the wealthy, who get to rot their teeth at an accelerated pace. For you, it's a slow battle against gritty bread, pebble-laced porridge, and a lifetime of gnawing on whatever's edible. Toothaches are a constant companion, persistent, throbbing, and utterly inescapable. What do you do when a tooth goes bad? Well, brace yourself. There are no dentists, but there are barber surgeons. The very same gentleman who trims your hair will gladly yank out an offending molar with a rusty iron hook and zero anesthesia. Picture it, candlelight, a blood-stained apron, and the soothing sound of your own scream echoing off the stone walls. If infection sets in, you can look forward to fevers, and if you're truly blessed by the medieval gods, sepsis. Yes, you can die from a toothache. All this, and not a single tube of Sensodyne in sight. Don't even think about fresh breath. Halitosis is universal, and if you're single, your prospects are judged not by your dazzling smile, but by the number of chickens in your yard and how much land you can till. Kissing is less a romantic gesture and more an act of mutual endurance. Your mouth is a battlefield, and it's losing the war, one rotten tooth at a time. Now that your gums are throbbing and your soul is yearning for Novocaine, it's time to head outside. Work awaits. Forget offices, forget coffee breaks, and definitely forget promotions. Your job, like that of 90% of the population, is simple. Don't die while laboring for someone else's comfort. You're a peasant, which means you rise with the sun and collapse only when it disappears. Your tools are primitive, a splintered wooden hoe, a sickle with more rust than blade, and whatever bones in your back haven't given out yet. There are no weekends, no paid holidays, no sick leave. The rhythm is relentless. Sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Sunday is theoretically a day of rest, but if there's a harvest to bring in, or a raider to fend off, you'll be out there anyway, praying your infected toe doesn't turn black before the next mass. The work is brutal, fields are ploughed by hand, unless you're lucky enough to own an ox, your medieval Ferrari. You dig, sow, weed, and carry water until your spine curves into a question mark. No one asks if you're tired, no one cares about your mental health. If you're a woman, congratulations, you get to do all of this while raising children, cooking, cleaning, spinning wool, feeding animals, and pretending your husband's lice haven't migrated to your side of the bed. Children are drafted into this grim orchestra by age 6. School is a fantasy, toys are non-existent, and their only playthings are sticks, mud, and the faint hope of surviving past adolescence. If you're not a farmer, maybe you're a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper. Doesn't matter, you'll spend your days inhaling smoke, chemicals, or the fragrant aroma of animal guts in a suffocating shed. The pay, survival. The perks, occasional bleeding, and a front row seat to medieval workplace injuries. Break a bone, tough luck. Develop a fever, drink some warm beer, mutter a prayer, and get back to work. Missing a day isn't an option. If you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you're quickly replaced by someone equally desperate and expendable. The medieval version of job security is don't die yet. So you grip your battered shovel, ignore the blisters blossoming on your palms, and keep digging. Because in the Middle Ages, your job isn't a career. It's a slow-motion endurance test, a grim race against exhaustion, hunger, and the ever-present threat of disaster. And through it all, the only thing more relentless than the work is the will to survive, no matter how miserable the conditions get. And now, as your back screams in protest and your mouth throbs in silent agony, let's step into the next circle of medieval hell. The weather is about to become your next adversary. After all, what's a little rain, mud and freezing wind between you and survival? Now that your back is on fire from labouring in the fields, let's talk about the weather. So after a day spent stooped in the fields, your spine feeling like it's been replaced with a rack of old kindling, let's take a moment to appreciate the medieval weather, a relentless, shape-shifting adversary. I've haunted these drafty cottages for centuries, and let me assure you, the only constant is misery. Let's begin with winter, the season that turns your home into an elaborate meat locker. No insulation, no double glazing, not even a sad little weather strip. The walls are timber, riddled with gaps so wide you could slip a rooster through. The windows, forget glass. You've got a rag nailed over a hole, flapping in the icy breeze. The fire in the hearth, your supposed salvation, is more symbolic than functional. You're lucky to have enough firewood to keep it smouldering, but even that's a gamble. Step into the wrong patch of forest to collect sticks, and you risk a fine, a beating, or if you're truly unlucky, a date with the gallows for the crime of wood poaching. So you wrap yourself in your eternally damp, scratchy wool tunic, huddle close to the dying embers, and try to ignore the fact that your nose has gone numb. Your toes, they're more myth than memory, buried somewhere in your boots, forever cold and clammy. Your hands are stiff, your breath hangs in the air like a spectral warning, and any hopes you had for a cosy winter are dashed by the persistent drip of water from the ceiling. Frostbite? That's not a diagnosis, it's just what happens to the unlucky. The best you can hope for is that you wake up with all your extremities intact, but don't get too attached. Now, let's fast forward to summer. Surely, you think, the sun will bring relief. Allow me, your resident ghost, to burst that little bubble. Summer in the Middle Ages transforms your home into a clay oven. There's no fan, no ice cubes, no chance of a refreshing shower. The air inside is thick and unmoving. Just you sweating under layers you can't remove unless you fancy inciting a scandal or inviting a fresh crop of mosquito bites and disapproving stares from the local gossip mill. Flies swarm every surface, drawn by the ripe aroma of your unwashed body and the lingering scent of last week's goat stew fermenting in the corner. Mosquitoes conduct nightly raids on your exposed flesh. Sleep is a luxury, interrupted by the cacophony of neighbours arguing, livestock braying, and babies wailing. If you manage to doze off, you'll wake up in a puddle of your own sweat, your only pair of socks glued to your feet. Out in the fields, the sun is merciless. There's no SPF, no baseball cap, just a makeshift straw hat if you're lucky or desperate. Your thighs chafe, your skin burns, and you can't stop working because the harvest won't wait for your comfort. Heat stroke is called taking a bad turn, and if you collapse, you're more likely to get a scolding than sympathy. So, whether you're shivering in your hut, wondering if your toes will see spring, or roasting in the summer heat, one thing remains the same: your clothes itch, your food is bland, and the next soul-crushing chore is always waiting. Welcome to medieval climate control, also known as none whatsoever. Feeling parched? Fancy splashing some water on your face to wake up from this damp, feverish nightmare? Allow me to float you a warning. In the Middle Ages, water is not your friend. It's a stealthy assassin lurking in every puddle and stream. Let's start with drinking water. The local brook looks picturesque, crystal clear, babbling gently, straight out of a fantasy painting. But don't be fooled. Upstream, someone's tipped a chamber pot into it, or perhaps there's a bloated pig drifting by, adding its own special zest to the mix. Every sip is a lottery, and the prize is usually dysentery. That's why even toddlers drank beer. Before you picture a medieval frat party, let me clarify, it was small beer, barely alcoholic, but boiled, which killed off most of the microscopic menaces. Wine was an option if you were wealthy, but for most it was beer or bust. Hydration was a daily gamble. And what about bathing? Surely, you say, people washed. In theory, yes. In reality, they believed bathing opened your pores and let the plague march right in. So the dirtier you were, the safer, or so they told themselves, as the protective crust of filth grew ever thicker. Communal bathhouses did exist, but they quickly became infamous for gossip, scandal, and extracurricular activities that would make your parish priest blush. Naturally, the church stepped in to shut many down. Even if you did want a bath, the logistics were epic, hauling water from the well, boiling it over a smoky fire, filling a leaky wooden tub, and hoping nobody else used it first, or worse, after you. Rainwater? It collects in barrels, which double as breeding grounds for mosquitoes, bird droppings, and the occasional drowned rat. So whether it's for drinking, washing, or watering your crops, water in medieval times is less a life source and more a roulette wheel of disease. One bad gulp, and you're doubled over on a straw mattress, sweating and regretting every decision that led you here. Next time you enjoy a cold glass of tap water, spare a thought for your ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of hydration without hazard. Let's say you tempt fate and drink the water. Or maybe you just stub your toe on a rock shaped like disappointment. Either way, you're sick. You need help. You need a doctor. But you live in the Middle Ages, where medicine is more performance art than science, and every remedy comes with a side of existential dread. Diagnosis begins with the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to the learned men of the day, your body is a cauldron, and any imbalance means trouble. Got a fever? Clearly too much blood. The solution? Bloodletting. Out comes the dullest knife or a hungry leech, and away pours your life force into a bowl. Barbers, by the way, were the go-to for this delicate operation. Yes, you could get a haircut and a bloodletting all in one visit. 2 for the price of 1. Just don't expect a lollipop afterward. Feeling melancholic? Clearly an excess of black bile. The cure? Laxatives, herbal purges, or perhaps just a prayer and a cold compress while your family quietly prepares the coffin. If you're lucky, someone will light a candle. If not, well, at least the rats will keep you company. Break a bone or suffer a wound. Prepare for a surgical experience that would make a butcher wince. No anesthesia, unless you count passing out from the pain. The surgeon's tools haven't seen a drop of soap since the last crusade, and they're heated over the fire, not for sterilization, but for dramatic effect. Antibiotics. Not invented. Germ theory. A distant dream. Disease, they believe, comes from bad air, or perhaps from God's irritation with your sinful ways. Got a stomachache. Time for confession. A leech, and maybe a handful of crushed beetles for good measure. If your condition worsens, you'll be treated to even more leeches, a few questionable herbs, and a priest at your bedside to administer last rites just in case. Sometimes the only cure is death itself, which at least means no more medieval medicine. Should you survive, everyone assumes it's a miracle. The doctor takes credit, the priest thanks the saints, and the leech gets a promotion. Medicine, in the Middle Ages, is less about healing and more about surviving the cure. So, my dear living companion, if you think you could handle a day in the Middle Ages, just remember, the weather wants you frozen or roasted, the water wants you dead, and the medicine is only slightly less dangerous than the disease. Not that I'm complaining. Misery, after all, is excellent company for a ghost. But the day isn't over yet. After enduring biting winds, sweltering heat, and the ever-present threat of death by hydration or doctor, you've somehow survived. Which brings us to the next challenge: food, faith, and the social order. The delicate balancing act of simply staying alive. After a long day of labour, lice and leeches, it's finally time to eat. After slogging through another day of mud, back-breaking labour, and a lice population that could stage a revolt, you drag yourself back to your hovel, a structure that optimistically calls itself a home. Your stomach rumbles, already mourning what's to come. The promise of food is the only thing that keeps you upright. But don't get too excited. Dinner in the medieval world is less meal and more culinary Russian roulette. Let's start with preservation. There's no humming refrigerator in the corner. No just hope, salt, and the occasional cold snap to keep your meat from becoming a maggot playground. If you're lucky enough to have meat, it's probably been hanging for days, attracting flies who seem to have RSVP'd to the feast before you. Sometimes the meat is so well aged that you wonder if it's developed a personality. There's a suspicious brine pooling underneath, and a few rat-sized chunks missing. Bon appetit. But fear not, your daily bread is here to save you. Except, bread is no knight in shining armour. In a bad harvest, the flour gets stretched with whatever's handy, bark, sawdust, or a pinch of clay for that gritty mouthfeel. And if it's rye season, congratulations, you just scored a slice of ergot bread. Side effects include convulsions, hallucinations, and possibly a face-to-face with death himself. It's like a free trip to the afterlife with every bite. Vegetables? Only if the season permits, and the season always seems to be turnip. Turnips boiled, turnips mashed, turnips floating in a pottage so ancient it may have started as soup at your great-grandfather's wake. Pottage is the mystery stew that never truly leaves the pot, just keeps absorbing new flavours, new turnips, and the occasional unidentifiable lump. It simmers eternally, like the universe's least appetizing cauldron. Fruit offers a brief, tantalizing reprieve in autumn, but it rots fast, and sugar is more valuable than gold, hoarded by the rich who show off their blackened teeth as a status symbol. For you, apples are a fleeting treat, best enjoyed before they turn to mush. Dairy, that's another gamble. Fresh milk sours within hours, butter and cheese are loaded with bacteria, and yet you eat them anyway, muttering a prayer to Saint Salmonella. Seasonings. Let's just say you won't be seeing cinnamon or pepper unless you storm a noble's pantry. For you, flavour comes from onions, a dash of salt if luck shines, and the existential bitterness of your own suffering. Most meals taste like regret, with a hint of burlap and a generous sprinkle of disappointment. Food isn't just a test of your digestive fortitude, it's a political minefield. All game rabbits, deer, even the scrawniest pigeon belong to the Lord. Caught poaching? You could be fined, mutilated, or hanged from the nearest tree as a warning. Imagine risking your life for a rabbit stew that tastes like swamp water. Every meal is an act of courage, or maybe just desperation. So you huddle by the weak glow of the fire, spooning grey stew into your mouth. Every bite a calculated risk. You eat not because you expect pleasure, but because you must. In the medieval world, food doesn't nourish. It's a daily trial you're expected to survive, or at least endure with minimal vomiting. Night falls, but don't think you're off the hook. The day's suffering is just shifting gears. Now, it's time for that other omnipresent force, faith. God is watching. So is the priest. So is your neighbour Agnes, who has never missed a chance to tattle on someone for skipping mass. Religion isn't a part of life. It is life, woven into every minute, every heartbeat. The church is your calendar, your law, your judge, and your landlord. And, as usual, you're behind on rent. The tolling of prayer bells is the soundtrack to your existence. Morning, noon, and night, you're summoned to kneel, bow, and chant. Because missing a prayer isn't just lazy, it's a sin. Forget to bow? Sin. Eat meat on a Friday? Sin. Think impure thoughts about the blacksmith's wife? Double sin. And in case you're unclear, hell is described in such lurid detail by the priest that you can practically smell the brimstone. Reading the Bible yourself? Not a chance. It's written in Latin, the language of monks, priests, and that one noble son who thinks he's better than everyone. You rely entirely on the church to interpret God's will, which means if the priest blames your crop failure on your lackluster praying, you'd better get those knees dirty. Tithes are non-negotiable. 1/10 of everything you own, grain, eggs, chickens, even your last copper coin, goes to the church. If you have nothing, you're both spiritually bankrupt and materially doomed. Holidays are plentiful, but they're not for fun. They're holy days, filled with mass, fasting, confession, and the gnawing suspicion that joy itself is sinful. Questioning the church? Dangerous move. Heretics are burned, witches are drowned, blasphemers flogged, and skeptics quickly reminded that faith is not optional. You go through the motions, eyes down, lips moving, praying your soul might one day escape this mud-caked existence, assuming the priest puts in a good word for you. If you thought surviving as a man was rough, try it as a woman. All the filth, hunger and terror, plus childbirth, subservience, and a social status that ranks somewhere between livestock and furniture. Being a woman in the Middle Ages is like playing life on hard mode, with no cheat codes and a permanently broken controller. From the moment you're born, your fate is sealed. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, and die exhausted. Education? Only if you're noble and lucky enough to be shipped to a convent. Otherwise, your intellectual journey ends at churning butter and patching tunics. Marriage happens early, really early. You might be betrothed at 12, pregnant at 13, and a grandmother before you're 30. Love has nothing to do with it. It's all about land, livestock, and alliances. Your opinion is neither sought nor required. Once married, you become your husband's property. Your job is to produce heirs, feed everyone, run the household, and never complain. Complaining gets you labelled a nag, or worse, a witch. That label comes with a complimentary drowning or burning, depending on the local fashion. Childbirth is a death lottery. No prenatal care, no sterile instruments, no anaesthesia. Midwives do what they can, but even a minor complication is potentially fatal for mother, child, or both. If you survive childbirth, congratulations, your work just doubled. Now you're tending a screaming infant in a lice-infested hut, expected to nurse, cook, clean, and still help with the harvest. There are no breaks. You are the break for everyone else. If you're unmarried, you're suspicious. If you're widowed, you're vulnerable. If you're outspoken, you're dangerous. Women who step out of line, herbalists, midwives, or anyone with a backbone, risk accusations of witchcraft, especially if they're unlucky enough to have a neighbour like Agnes. Even in the church, women remain second class. Nuns live by strict rules: no speaking without permission, no freedom to leave, and always spiritually ranked below men. Suffering is expected, but doing it gracefully is mandatory. In the medieval playbook, women are to endure, obey, reproduce, and smile through the pain. So, you've battled filth, hunger, and injustice. Surely, that's enough for one life. Not so fast. Violence is the background noise of the Middle Ages, a constant bloody presence. Law and order, more like pray the lords in a good mood. Violence is everywhere, in the home, on the street, at the market, and even in church disputes. Crime is common, punishment is spectacularly brutal, and justice is more about spectacle than protection. Steal a loaf of bread, say goodbye to your hand. Caught lying, your tongue might get pierced. Gossip too freely, meet the scold's bridle. A metal mask with a bar that silences the mouth for your own good, of course. Accused of a serious crime, like heresy or witchcraft. Prepare for trial by ordeal. Maybe you'll fish a stone from boiling water. If your hand heals cleanly in 3 days, you're innocent. If not, well, better luck next time. Or you might be tossed into a river, sink and you're innocent and dead, float and you're guilty, and soon to be dead. It's the original lose-lose game show. Executions are public entertainment, a rare chance for the community to gather and enjoy some light beheading or burning. People bring snacks. It's the medieval version of Sunday football, but with more screaming and less beer. Domestic violence is normal. Husbands are encouraged to discipline wives and children, often with whatever stick is handy. Street fights are a daily hazard. Look at a noble's horse the wrong way, and you could be beaten senseless. And then there's war, a never-ending carousel of feuds, crusades, and border skirmishes. Someone is always marching off to stab someone else in the name of honor, God, or just to break the monotony. Violence isn't a breakdown of society, it is society. Everyone lives with the constant awareness that life is fragile, justice is arbitrary, and your neighbor might bash your head in over a particularly plump chicken. So, you walk carefully, keep your eyes down, and never trust anyone wielding a club. In the medieval world, survival isn't about thriving, it's about enduring. Food, faith, and the social order are less about comfort and more about testing your limits. Most days you don't live so much as you persist, clinging to hope that tomorrow's turnip is slightly less rubbery and that no one accuses you of witchcraft before dinner. But don't get too comfortable. The real test is still to come. Death is always lurking. Legacy is a cruel joke, and myth is the only comfort you're allowed. Which brings us to our next act, the dance with mortality and the unexpected ascent from peasant squalor to imperial power. At this point, you've made it through the lice, the leeches, the laundryless misery, and the looming threat of public disembowelment. So you've slogged through the great medieval gauntlet, itching, scratching, and cursing your way past lice, leeches, and the general stench of unwashed humanity. You've survived the unending parade of chores, the looming spectre of public disembowelment, and the sort of meals that make rule look like fine dining. But now, as the candle of your medieval life sputters out, you face the last best-kept secret of the era, death. Not the poetic candlelit expiration of legends, mind you. No, yours is likely to be as unremarkable as a winter's morning, early, unglamorous, and if you're lucky, not particularly memorable. If you're wheezing along past 40, you're less a person and more a local curiosity, the old one. They might call you, as if you're some sort of ancient woodland spirit who's mysteriously outlived your teeth. But don't let that nickname go to your head. It's not so much flattery as it is a statistical marvel, because in real numbers, the average medieval lifespan hovers somewhere in the mid-30s. That's right, 30-something, and that's only if you survive the first few rounds. Let's talk about the first grim lottery, childhood. Nearly half of all children never make it past their 5th birthday. Disease, hunger, a nasty cough, or simply being born at the wrong time of year, any of these can snuff out a young life before it's even begun. No vaccines, no antibiotics, just prayers, herbs, and the hope that whatever's killing the neighbours will politely skip your household. If you do survive, congratulations, you're already halfway to being an elder. But that's just the start. By the time you're old enough to carry a bucket, you're working. Childhood is less a stage of life and more a brief intermission between birth and labour. By your 20s, your joints creak like monastery doors in November. You're probably missing several teeth, a finger or two, and, if you're particularly unlucky, most of your original optimism. The Middle Ages, where hope goes to die, and arthritis is a rite of passage. Now, let's not forget the uniquely medieval horror that is childbirth. For women, this was less a miracle and more a recurring death match. There's no anesthesia, no surgical intervention, and the only thing sterile is the priest's Latin. You lie on a straw-stuffed cot, clutching a hand, and hope you won't bleed out before sunrise. Childbirth is one of the leading causes of death for women, and no amount of prayer or hot water changes that equation. Men aren't exactly skipping through meadows either. Their hazards are different, but equally relentless. Farming accidents, infected wounds, a neighbour with a grudge and a kitchen knife, or a conscription notice from some war-hungry noble. Pick your poison. Even a stroll to the market can end in disaster if you catch the eye of a bored bandit or a tax collector with a quota to meet. In the Middle Ages, fate is fickle and rarely on your side. Then there's the silent killer, plague. One day you're gossiping in the square, the next the whole town is a graveyard. Famine, too, is always waiting in the wings. One bad harvest, and your village thins out like a poorly attended feast. Or perhaps you simply eat the wrong batch of rye and spend your last hours hallucinating and screaming at the walls, dying of bad bread. Now that's a legacy. When the end finally comes, don't expect a grand send-off. Funerals are swift affairs, more about disease control than remembrance. No embalming, no polished wood, just a shallow grave, a hurried prayer, and, if you're lucky, a spot in the churchyard that isn't already spoken for. If you're not so lucky, well, the woods are always accepting new residents. So there you have it. Life, death, and a dash of misery all bundled together in the medieval experience. You don't retire, you simply stop showing up. One day you're hauling buckets, the next you're just another missing face at the morning roll call, and thus ends the medieval dream, with a whimper, not a bang. Let's take stock. You've woken up in filth, braved the bucket privy, brushed your teeth with a prayer, nearly fainted from hunger, slaved away until your spine threatens mutiny, endured itchy wool, dodged the plague, and narrowly avoided execution for some trivial offence, say squirrel theft. Welcome to your average day in medieval Europe. Still dreaming of knights and noble deeds? I'd advise against it. The romanticised Middle Ages, gallant knights, fair maidens, candlelit feasts are as much a fantasy as dragons and talking swords. The real Middle Ages are gritty, cruel, and built on a foundation of suffering. Hierarchy is everything. Born poor, you stay poor. Born rich, better odds, but you're still one bowl of questionable stew away from dysentery and a hasty burial. Even the castles are more draughty fridge than fairy tale palace. Smoke, fleas, and the ever-present threat of political marriage. Luxury? Not quite. Nobles may have furs and wine, but they also have a 50% chance of dying in a pointless skirmish or from an infected splinter. Simpler times? Only if you think endless drudgery is simple. Everything hurts more, takes longer, and comes with consequences, whether it's childbirth or just chewing. And what of dreams? Even if you find a rare moment to imagine a better life, there's not much you can do about it. No social mobility, no penicillin, no Google to diagnose your latest rash. You live, suffer and die within a 10-mile radius of your birthplace. The medieval world is a closed loop, and you're running laps until you drop. Yet, here's the rub. Despite the misery, people laugh, sing, fall in love, and find meaning. Not because life is easy, but because humans are stubborn creatures. Even in the darkest chapters, they make space for light, a song, a joke, a moment of warmth. It's almost admirable if you squint past the lice. So tonight, as you slip into your clean bed, complete with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and the miracle of central heating, maybe tip your hat to the ancestors who braved rats, famine, and feudalism so you wouldn't have to. They suffered so you could complain about Wi-Fi. Now, let's pivot from the anonymous masses to one particular survivor, a woman whose legacy would outlast even the most persistent medieval myth, Catherine the Great. But before she was Catherine, she was Sophie. Sophie Frederica August von Anhalt-Zerbst, to be precise. Born to a minor German princely family, her early life was so unremarkable that even my ghostly self could have blinked and missed it. Yet Sophie had something that no title or fortune could bestow: razor-sharp intelligence, relentless charm, and an ambition that burned quietly beneath the surface. Sophie's upbringing was all discipline and social climbing. Her mother Johanna was less warm embrace and more ice-pick in the back, a schemer obsessed with status. Her father, a Prussian officer, was so emotionally distant he might as well have been a ghost himself. Sophie learned early to walk the tightrope between obedience and cunning. She devoured books, mastered languages, and watched every room before she dared speak, a survival strategy that would serve her well in the carnivorous courts of Europe. When Empress Elizabeth of Russia went shopping for a bride for her heir Grand Duke Peter, she didn't want a firebrand. She wanted pliability, a foreigner grateful for Russian hospitality, easy to control. Sophie, with her noble blood and Lutheran faith, soon to be traded in, fit the bill. At just 14, she was summoned to Russia, bundled in thin German fabrics, and shipped off to the frozen capital like a diplomatic package. Her mother nudged her forward, but Sophie was already reading the board and planning her own endgame. To survive at court, Sophie had to transform. She converted to Orthodoxy, publicly and irrevocably, and became Ekaterina Alexeyevna, Catherine. The ceremony wasn't just about changing gods, it was about burning the bridges behind her. No going back to Pomerania, no second chances. Standing there in her fur-trimmed coat, a teenage foreigner in a cold, glittering city, Catherine was already plotting her future. Nobody watching that quiet girl in the palace halls would have guessed what was coming. Betrayal, revolution, enlightenment, and the forging of an empire. Catherine stopped being a pawn and started planning to become queen. Her marriage to Grand Duke Peter was supposed to secure her place, but it felt more like a beautifully gilded cage. Peter, the heir, was no Prince Charming, awkward, childish, obsessed with toy soldiers and Frederick the Great, and utterly disinterested in ruling or in Catherine. Some say Peter refused even to consummate the marriage for years. He spent his nights playing war games, idolizing Prussia, and snubbing the Russian court that had adopted him. Catherine, meanwhile, set about conquering Russia, not with armies, but with language, ritual, and relentless adaptation. She learned Russian, memorized Orthodox customs, and watched, always watching, as her husband fumbled through the role he was born to play. The mismatch wasn't just personal, it was political dynamite. The Russian court was a viper's nest of gossip, paranoia, and backstabbing. Empress Elizabeth still ruled, but her health was fading. Everyone knew the throne would soon be up for grabs, and everyone had a scheme. Catherine's every move was scrutinized. Her letters read, her friendships dissected, her loyalty questioned. She couldn't trust her husband, her mother, or even her own servants. But Catherine was no fool. She played the game in whispers and shadows, cultivating allies in the military and among scholars. She became known for dignity and restraint, a stark contrast to Peter's childish tantrums and open contempt for Russian traditions. Behind closed doors, she devoured the works of Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Montesquieu, dreaming of a Russia remade by reason and strength. There was just one obstacle: Peter. The longer he lived, the longer Catherine remained a powerless consort. She waited, watched and plotted, knowing full well that the Russian throne wouldn't be inherited. It would have to be seized. So she bided her time, a shadow among shadows, preparing for the moment when the empire's fate would hinge on a single act of will. Finally, after nearly 2 decades of manoeuvring, Catherine saw her chance. Empress Elizabeth died, and Peter, now Peter III, became Tsar. His reign was a masterclass in alienation. He insulted the nobility, offended the church, praised Prussia, Russia's sworn enemy, and talked openly of divorcing Catherine. Within months, he managed to alienate nearly every power broker in the empire. The court turned cold. The army, filled with Catherine's loyalists, grumbled in the corridors. Ordinary Russians saw Peter as a foreign puppet, mocking their traditions and threatening their faith. Catherine, ever the strategist, made her move. In July, while Peter vacationed at his summer palace, she launched her coup. With the support of military officers, including her lover, Grigory Orlov, and the powerful Imperial Guard, she swept into St. Petersburg and was proclaimed Empress. Peter, caught off guard and abandoned by allies, surrendered without a fight. Days later, he was dead, officially from hemorrhoidal colic, but everyone knew better. The throne was Catherine's, not by birth, not by marriage, but by sheer force of will. It was a coup without precedent, a foreign-born woman with no legitimate claim, seizing the Russian Empire without a single battle fought. But the real work was just beginning. Catherine understood that power won by intrigue could be lost just as easily. She needed to transform her bold grab for authority into a legacy that would outlast her enemies' whispers. Would Russia accept her? Would the nobility respect her? Could she keep the empire from fracturing beneath her feet? Catherine's answer was as audacious as her coup. She would not rule as a schemer, but as a visionary. Her transformation from conspirator to empress would redraw borders, embrace the Enlightenment, and redefine what it meant to wield power as a woman. The story of Catherine the Great was just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. So you've finally seized the Russian crown. You could spend your days lounging on velvet, sipping watered-down wine, and pretending you don't notice the draft in your palace corridors. But not Catherine. No, she's not content with simply being called Empress. She wants to drag Russia kicking, screaming, and probably lice-ridden into the modern age. And you, ghostly observer, drift beside her, watching as she trades the sword for a quill, the feast for a philosophical salon. Unlike her late unlamented husband Peter, whose idea of progress was playing dress-up as Frederick the Great and marching toy soldiers, Catherine sets her sights on the Enlightenment. She devours the works of Voltaire and Diderot, scrawling letters in cramped candlelight, her ink-stained fingers betraying the monarch's secret. She's a hopeless bookworm. You've seen her, hunched over parchment, debating with herself whether to flatter Voltaire or challenge him. Spoiler, she does both, and he laps it up, delighted to have an empress as his pen pal. Catherine doesn't just read philosophy, she weaponizes it. She invites Diderot to her court, buying his entire library out of both intellectual curiosity and a generous dash of imperial patronage. You float unseen through the library's chilly corridors, watching as she pores over legal texts, her breath fogging in the winter air. She debates reforms with advisors who look half terrified and half awed, knowing that this empress is more interested in ideas than etiquette. The early years of her reign are a fever dream of legislation and grand plans. Catherine assembles the Legislative Commission, a gathering so large and unwieldy, you suspect half of them are just there for the free vodka. Her nakaz, or instruction, is a political treatise disguised as legal advice. She talks of equality before the law, the dangers of torture and the monarch's duty to serve, not simply rule. In the Russia you haunt, this is nothing short of revolutionary. But let's not get carried away with the Parisian fantasy. The Enlightenment, as you know all too well, must survive the permafrost of Russian reality, a land where the nobility would sooner eat their own powdered wigs than give up their serfs. Catherine, ever the pragmatist, knows this game. She abolishes some forms of torture, just the really messy ones, opens schools, and sprinkles in a few libraries for good measure. Yet she also reaffirms the rights of noble landowners over their serfs, ensuring the support of those whose loyalty she cannot afford to lose. Here is Catherine's true balancing act. Philosopher queen in the public eye, ruthless operator behind closed doors. She walks a tightrope strung between Parisian salons, where everyone discusses Rousseau's latest tantrum, and Russian corridors of power, where the stench of boiled cabbage and fear permeates the air. Her vision is bold, but she always calculates the cost in blood, bread, and political capital. You might imagine she wants to make Russia European. Not quite. Catherine's ambition is to make Russia modern on her own terms. That means reform. Yes, but always with an iron hand sheathed in a velvet glove, and when the glove comes off, you'd better not be in the way. But why stop at reforming what you have? Catherine wants more. She doesn't just want to be Empress of Russia. She wants to be Empress of an empire that makes the rest of Europe sweat through their brocade waistcoats. Where Peter the Great cracked open a window to the west, Catherine is determined to bulldoze the whole wall. Her armies march south against the Ottoman Empire, a campaign as endless as Russian winter. You hover above battlefields littered with mud, blood, and the occasional frozen moustache. These wars, stretching through the 1760s and 70s, aren't just about land, they're about prestige. Catherine casts herself as the liberator of Orthodox Christians, the avenging angel of Eastern Europe. Under generals like Suvorov and Potemkin, Russia seizes Crimea, the Black Sea coast, and most importantly, access to warm water ports, a prize Russian Tsars have drooled over for generations. Every conquest is a message. Russia is no longer the awkward cousin at Europe's dinner table. It's a guest who brings its own vodka and expects the good silverware. Catherine's gaze turns west, where Poland sits, weak and tempting. Through backroom deals and diplomatic sleight of hand, she joins Austria and Prussia in carving up the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. By the Third Partition, Poland isn't just conquered, it's erased, its lands and people absorbed into the ever-hungry Russian maw. But Catherine doesn't only conquer with soldiers, she colonizes with ideas. New cities sprout from the steppe like toadstools after a rainstorm. Trade routes snake across the empire, and she invites German settlers to till the stubborn Russian soil. You drift through new settlements, smelling fresh-turned earth and the faint hope of prosperity, though the air is still thick with manure, and no, there's still no indoor plumbing. The empire becomes a patchwork quilt, stitched together by Catherine's will, stretching from icy Baltic ports to the sun-bleached shores of the Black Sea. Through it all, she remains the nucleus, reading dispatches, issuing decrees and micromanaging generals who know better than to ignore her midnight notes. Critics whisper that she's power-mad, but Catherine sees herself as fulfilling destiny. She's not ambitious, she's inevitable. Of course, it's not just her statecraft that keeps tongues wagging. Behind the palace doors, where the air smells of candle wax, sweat and intrigue, Catherine's personal life becomes the stuff of legend. She doesn't merely have lovers, she maintains an entire casting call of them. Young, handsome, occasionally bright, and always rewarded for good behaviour with titles, land or a polite send-off. There's no point hiding it. If Europe is scandalised by a woman who chooses her own companions, so be it. Her most notorious paramour, Grigory Potemkin, is not just a lover but a co-ruler, a man whose ambition matches her own. Some whisper they married in secret, but you, eternal ghost, know that their partnership was far more interesting, a fusion of passion, politics and mutual respect that reshaped the empire's southern frontier. Potemkin helps mastermind the colonization of Crimea and the building of new cities, while Catherine rewards his loyalty and one suspects his bedside manner with influence and power. Their relationship is a chess match, each move calculated, each embrace laced with strategy. Other lovers come and go, often leaving with a generous pension and a relieved sigh. Her exes are the luckiest in Europe. How many can say they survived loving an empress? But Europe cannot look past the scandal. Satirical pamphlets fly from printing presses, painting Catherine as insatiable, unhinged, and after her death, subject to the most grotesque rumours imaginable. You know the one about the horse? It's nonsense, but it spreads like lice in a barracks. Why the obsession? Because Catherine refuses to apologise for her power or her pleasure. In a world where female rulers are expected to be either untouchable saints or tragic victims, Catherine insists on being neither. She claims her agency, her sexuality and her throne, all with the same unapologetic flair. Ironically, while her critics clutch their pearls, Catherine herself is philosophical about love and sex. She sees pleasure as natural, relationships as tools, and emotions as separate from governance, a trick most male monarchs never manage. Her lovers are often chosen for their loyalty and usefulness. When they outlive their purpose, they're dismissed with a smile and a well-padded purse. Her private passions are woven into her public strategy, not a distraction but an asset. So, as you haunt the gilded halls and candlelit boudoirs of St. Petersburg, you see the truth behind the myth. Catherine's reign is a tapestry of Enlightenment ideals, ruthless expansion, and unapologetic power. She is both philosopher and conqueror, both lover and empress. She endures, not despite the suffering and constraints of her world, but because she bends them to her will, always on her own terms. And as the myths and scandals swirl around her legacy, you ancient ghosts know that none of it could ever diminish the scale of her ambition, the sharpness of her mind, or the sheer force of her personality. But for all her charisma and control, Catherine's reign was not without peril. The story of her legacy and its contradictions is just beginning. Let me draw you, spectral companion, back to St. Petersburg, where the candlelit corridors of power are thick with the scent of wax, sweat and fear. You'd think an empress could sleep easy on all that velvet, but no, the air is tense, prickling with the rumours of revolt. And here, in the shadows, I've watched the arrival of a most inconvenient ghost, Yemelyan Pugachev, a Cossack with a beard wild enough to house a small family of lice. He's no ordinary rebel. He claims loudly, madly, to be Peter III, Catherine's supposedly dead husband. Picture it, a ragged man, eyes glinting with desperate hope, shouting, "I am your true Tsar," to crowds who just want a scrap of bread and maybe a break from being whipped. Now, you and I both know Peter III was as dead as last week's borscht. But for Russia's peasants, trapped in serfdom, taxed to the marrow, and living in huts that make your first apartment look palatial, the truth isn't as important as the promise. Pugachev speaks of freedom, land, and lower taxes. He might as well be promising memory foam mattresses and central heating. His words ignite the Volga basin. The Pugachev rebellion erupts, the largest peasant uprising this old ghost has ever hovered over. Town after town falls, fortresses are seized. Nobles, those powdered, perfumed ornaments, are slaughtered in their drawing rooms. For a moment, a sharp, terrifying moment, it seems the empire itself might shatter like a teacup dropped on stone. Catherine's grip on the throne is suddenly slippery with sweat. But Catherine, in her drafty palace, doesn't collapse into hysterics. No, she stiffens her spine. This isn't a war with foreign uniforms and treaties. This is Russia rising up from the mud and straw. She summons her generals, dispatches professional soldiers, and orders the rebellion to be crushed with all the subtlety of a falling anvil. Pugachev is caught, caged like an animal, paraded through the streets in an iron prison. I watch the crowds jeer and spit, their hope snuffed out again as he's beheaded in Moscow, a warning written in blood. Afterward, Catherine's dreams of liberating the serfs fade into the same silence that fills the palace halls at midnight. Enlightenment ideals? Lovely for letters to Voltaire, useless for keeping your head attached. She leans harder on the nobility, trading their loyalty for their absolute dominion over serfs. The woman who once quoted philosophy now prioritizes order. Reform becomes a careful, gloved affair. Surveillance sharpens. Even whispers of rebellion are stamped out before they can draw breath. Pugachev is gone, but his shadow lingers. Catherine knows now. Power built on the backs of the suffering can only last until someone lights a match. She rules, but always with one wary eye on the horizon, waiting for the next storm. And yet she endures. By the time she approaches her final years, she's ruled Russia for more than 3 decades, the longest reign of any woman in Russian history. She's not just survived, she's thrived, turning expectation on its head and reshaping her empire. Under her iron grip, Russia balloons in size. Crimea, hunks of Poland, the Black Sea coast. She gobbles them up like a bear at a picnic. These aren't just land grabs, they're strategic moves, securing warm water ports and opening trade. The map of Europe is redrawn, and Russia is suddenly a player, not a punchline. Western Europe, which once snickered at Russia's backwardness, now finds itself peering eastward with a wary respect. Catherine's legacy isn't just etched into borders. Her fingerprints are all over Russia's culture. She founds the Hermitage Museum, amassing art like a magpie with a penchant for oil paint. She writes to the greatest minds of the Enlightenment, her correspondence thick with wit and argument. Her court becomes a glittering salon of artists, philosophers and schemers. She even introduces smallpox inoculation to Russia, rolling up her own sleeve to set the example. Not a move for the faint-hearted, especially with 18th century medicine. Yet, as I float through these ornate halls, I see the cracks behind the gilding. Catherine's reign is a tapestry of contradictions. She loves Enlightenment ideals but never frees the serfs. In fact, she tightens the chains, extending serfdom deeper into the empire. Her reforms are impressive on paper, but rarely touch the foundations. It's all top-down, new schools, printing presses, but the mud in the villages remains the same. The misery, if anything, gets more organized. Still, Catherine brings stability and ambition to a land that's known precious little of either. She understands that power isn't inherited, it's seized, shaped and defended with every ounce of cunning. She rules not by divine right, but by force of will. They call her many things: usurper, tyrant, reformer, seductress. But above all, they call her effective. When she finally dies, Russia is richer, larger and more formidable than it's been in centuries. The throne is secure, the empire expanded. And the legend, well, that grows even larger. But let's not be fooled by portraits and propaganda. Behind the marble busts and imperial decrees is a woman who knows the ground beneath her is always shifting. Catherine is acutely aware of her precariousness. She is not Russian by birth. She came to power through a coup, not a coronation. She rules a nation that bristles at the idea of a woman in charge. And yet she doesn't just endure, she dominates. Every day is a chess match against rivals, courtiers and fate itself. Her daily routine would flatten most mortals. Hours spent reading reports, scribbling memos, corresponding with foreign monarchs, editing state papers, and navigating a court that's one part masquerade, one part Shark Tank. She is not content to simply wear the crown. She works the throne with the focus of a surgeon and the paranoia of someone who knows exactly how sharp the knives are. And yet, for all the grandeur, there is loneliness. Catherine surrounds herself with courtiers, lovers, and artists, but trust is a rare coin. In her memoirs, she confides how few people she can truly rely on. Her son Paul, kept at arm's length, never allowed near the engines of power, grows into a man she fears will unravel all she's built. Her greatest emotional bond with Grigory Potemkin evolves from passion to deep friendship, and his death leaves a hollow that nothing fills. Catherine is a master of self-mythology. She crafts her image with the precision of a painter, mother of Russia, enlightened despot, warrior queen, patron of the arts. But beneath the layers is a woman who has endured betrayal, scandal, and rebellion. Each wound is stitched over with resolve. She survives not because she is untouched, but because she refuses to break. When she finally dies, no, not the infamous horse rumour. Let's put that tired story back in the stable. She leaves behind an empire transformed, but also a raft of questions. Could she have done more to free the serfs? Did she betray her Enlightenment ideals for the sake of power? Was she truly a reformer, or simply a ruthlessly competent ruler? History, as always, answers with a shrug and a smirk. The title The Great, she never claimed it for herself. It was, in the end, an acknowledgement of her audacity, not because she was flawless or just or kind, but because she took power and bent it to her will in a world that expected women to be seen, not heard. She didn't just wear the crown, she rewrote what it meant to deserve one. And in doing so, Catherine became less a person and more a myth, a legend stitched together from triumph, contradiction, and the sheer unyielding force of survival. So, as the candle gutters in the imperial palace and the crowds outside return to their cold, crowded hovels, you might wonder, what endures? The empire, the art, or the myth of Catherine herself, striding through history in a dress far too grand for any one woman to bear? I've watched centuries pass, and I can tell you, legends are forged not in comfort, but in adversity. Catherine's is no exception. But myths, like empires, are built on bones and secrets. And as we drift from the opulent decay of St. Petersburg, let's turn our gaze far from the icy rivers of Russia to a land of stone temples and crimson tombs. In the humid depths of the Chiapas jungle in southern Mexico, the ruins of Palenque whisper stories from the ancient Maya world. Let's slip once more through the tangled vines and oppressive humidity of Chiapas, where Palenque's ruins still sweat secrets into the jungle air. You and I, spectral, unseen, drift among these ancient stones, eavesdropping as time peels back its crust. The temples loom, battered and defiant, their faces smudged by centuries of rain and the occasional bat guano. Romantic? Only if you fancy mildew and the constant threat of jaguar droppings. It's 1994, and a cluster of mortal archaeologists led by Fanny Lopez Jimenez are poking around a pyramid so underwhelming it's practically the architectural equivalent of a broom closet. It sits beside the grander, ego-stroking Temple of the Inscriptions, where King Pakal the Great lounges eternally. No one expects much from this squat little mound. Until, of course, the ground gives up a secret, a sealed chamber, untouched by looters, unsullied by the sticky fingers of time. You can almost feel the collective intake of breath as the archaeologists chip away at the stone. I hover, as ghosts do, just over their shoulders. When the slab finally groans open, a rush of air thick with centuries of rot and anticipation greets them. Inside, a stone sarcophagus, resting in the hush. The silence is so dense, you could cut it with a jade blade. Now, here's where things get theatrical. The lid is pried loose. A bloom of red dust, brilliant, lurid, and utterly toxic, erupts like a magician's trick gone sideways. Cinnabar, mercury sulfide, crushed to powder, sacred and deadly. It coats everything, clinging to the sarcophagus, the chamber walls, the bones inside, red as fresh blood, or a bad lipstick decision. Within that sanguine fog lies a skeleton, fragile but stubbornly intact, a woman swaddled in ritual and reverence, her skull still wearing a jade mask. The jewellery is extravagant. Necklaces, diadems, ear spools, all jade and shell. No economy seating for this lady. She's first class into the afterlife. Every artifact screams royalty, yet the room is strangely mute. No glyphs, no name, no here lies so-and-so. A queen perhaps, or a priestess, or both, or someone no one wants you to remember by name. She becomes the Red Queen, because mortals are nothing if not literal. Even the most advanced forensic wizardry can't pin her down. She lived in the 7th century, during Palenque's golden age, but her identity is as elusive as privacy in a Maya sweat bath. Unlike most tombs, this one is unmolested, isolated, and so intentional it's almost accusatory. She isn't meant to be remembered in words, but in ritual, her story told in colour, silence, and the sharp tang of mystery. But let's linger on the cinnabar, shall we? I've seen a lot of ancient burials, most of them less glamorous than a modern dog's grave. But this, the red dust is suffocating, clinging like a curse. To the Maya, cinnabar wasn't just a pigment, it was the blood of the earth, a symbol of rebirth, sacrifice, and the cosmic life force. Red meant sunrise, sacrifice, and the thin, trembling line between the living and the dead. Of course, cinnabar is also catastrophic for your health. Mercury poisoning, tremors, hallucinations. If you're lucky, you die before you go mad. The Maya didn't know the chemical details, but they understood power when they saw it. Covering the dead in cinnabar was a statement. This person is not like you, not even close. At Palenque, only the mighty, like Pakal himself, were entombed in such a riot of red. The Red Queen's burial echoes his in detail and drama. Is she his wife? His mother? Someone who could order a king to take out the trash? The speculation is endless, and the evidence deliciously refuses to cooperate. Her skull rests on jaguar skin, a pelt as sacred as it is smelly. Surrounding her, bone needles, obsidian blades, and miniature jade figurines, each a potential relic from rituals performed in her honor or by her own hand. There's a narrative here, a story of authority, pain, and transformation, told without a single word. The offerings are as intentional as they are sparse. Jade necklaces, cold and heavy, lie across her chest. Jade was the Maya's ticket to eternity, its green glow a stand-in for maize, jungle, and the breath of the gods. Only the elite got to rot with jade. For the Red Queen, it's everywhere, on her wrists, ears, and heart. The jade mask is a masterpiece in miniature. Not the gold death masks of Egypt, but a lattice of tiny tiles, each one fitted to her features with obsessive care. It's less about vanity, more about metaphysics. The mask preserves identity, protects the soul, and presents her as divine to the gods. Scattered near her bones are bone needles and obsidian blades, tools or symbols or both. Perhaps she was a priestess, a healer, a matriarch. One bone pin is engraved, its message faded but deliberate, a whisper across centuries, barely audible over the din of academic argument. At her feet, ceramic vessels, sealed tight, once brimming with food, drink, or incense. The Maya viewed death as a journey, hazardous, labyrinthine, and absolutely not all-inclusive. These weren't luxury goods, they were survival kits for the underworld. The tomb is intimate, almost minimalist. No golden chariots, no pyramids of slaves, just a handful of objects heavy with spiritual charge. It's a treasure map for the soul, not a museum exhibit for the board. Through these tokens, you glimpse the Maya view of death, not an end, but a promotion. But for all this grandeur, the Red Queen is a cipher. No name, no inscription, just power, wrapped in silence and scarlet. Theories abound. Is she Zak Kuk, Pakal's wife, a noble woman of blood and ceremony? She bore sons, played key ceremonial roles, and her tomb's proximity to Pakal's suggests a deliberate pairing, rulers in life, partners in death. The cinnabar, the location, the jade, it all fits. But DNA tests muddy the waters. The Red Queen's bones show no direct maternal link to Pakal. Maybe she was his wife, not his mother. Maybe she was neither, but someone whose influence eclipsed bloodlines. Some whisper of Zak Kuk, Pakal's formidable mother, who ruled Palenque with more grit than most men. Others propose a high priestess, a royal ancestor, or a matriarch whose name dissolved in the acid rain of history. Still, the evidence points to Zak Kuk, a queen by title, mother of kings, spiritual equal to Pakal. The absence of a name may not be an oversight. In Maya cosmology, immortality isn't about monuments, it's about ritual, symbol, and the persistent murmur of the earth. So here she is, suspended between legend and reality, a woman of immense influence, remembered not in stone but in scarlet dust and the hush of an untouched tomb. To understand her, you must understand her world. Maya women, especially those of royal blood, wielded more power than most modern textbooks admit. The Maya court was a family business, and women weren't just ornamental arm candy. They were diplomats, priestesses, and political brokers. They presided over rituals, sponsored temples, and propped up dynasties with their bloodlines, political currency in a world where legitimacy was always up for grabs. Zak Kuk is a prime example. When Palenque's throne was vacant, she ruled as regent, issuing decrees, commissioning buildings, and generally running the show until her son came of age. She wasn't a placeholder, she was the main event. And Zak Kuk was no outlier. Across the Maya world, in places like Yaxchilan, Naranjo, Calakmul, inscriptions show women leading ceremonies, negotiating treaties, and on occasion waging war. They are carved into stelae and murals, towering in feathered headdresses, standing beside or above kings. Their names echo until the Spanish arrive and the record goes conveniently silent. Colonial chroniclers preferred their women barefoot, silent, and preferably invisible. But the archaeology, bones, glyphs, jade, tells a messier, more interesting truth. Gender roles in Maya civilization were complex, negotiated, and frequently subverted. This casts the Red Queen in a new, more vivid light. Maybe she never ruled in name, but her burial rich, sacred and positioned beside Pakal marks her as a pillar of the royal order. Her jade mask isn't just ornament, it's a badge of identity and power, fiercely protected in death. Her bloodline may have been the glue that held Palenqui's dynasty together. In the Maya world, a queen wasn't just a queen, she was a keeper of lineage, a ceremonial voice, and sometimes the only bridge between gods and mortals. So yes, the Red Queen is nameless, but in her world she was never voiceless. Her power lingers, thick as cinnabar, haunting the stones, whispering through the centuries. And as for you, visitor, don't get too comfortable. The afterlife is crowded, the journey perilous, and there's definitely no coffee. But before you get lost in the scarlet haze, remember, the Red Queen wasn't just buried with treasures. Her tomb is a cosmic blueprint, a ritual map, and a legacy that stretches beyond bone and dust. Let's follow the trail deeper into ritual, myth, and the enduring echoes she left behind. You find yourself descending the suffocating stone corridor of Temple 13, each footstep echoing like a heartbeat in the stale air. I drift beside you, a silent ghost. Don't mind me, I've watched more burials than you've had hot showers. The Red Queen's tomb isn't just a grave, it's a riddle carved from limestone and centuries. Her body waits below, not in the grand palatial tomb of her king, but in a smaller pyramid, crouched in the shadow of Pakal's monumental resting place. The Maya didn't build by accident. Each temple's location was an act of cosmic choreography, measured in starlight and dynastic ambition. Temple 13 might look modest, but its secrets are anything but. You squeeze down a staircase so narrow you wonder if it was meant to keep out looters or just punish the claustrophobic. The air gets colder, heavier, as if the stones themselves are holding their breath. At the bottom, the chamber is stark, just cut stone and the oppressive hush of centuries. No murals, no boastful glyphs, just silence. But silence can be louder than words. This is a space for metamorphosis, not for mortal storytelling. The sarcophagus sits at the heart, squat and massive, altar-like, daring you to look inside. Pakal's tomb next door is famously flamboyant. His lid is a billboard of cosmic rebirth, a king tumbling into the jaws of the underworld tree. The Red Queen's? No such showmanship. Her focus is inward. Blood-red cinnabar dusts her bones, staining the air with the scent of mercury and mystery. Death here is not a spectacle, but a private ritual. The room is aligned east to west, a deliberate echo of the sun's daily demise and resurrection. You're standing in a cosmic corridor, a stone conduit for souls. It's small, yes, but charged with intention. The Maya believed their temples weren't just monuments, they were portals, bridges between realms. To be buried inside one was to step beyond humanity, to become part of the celestial machinery. This wasn't an afterthought, some convenient crypt for a royal spouse. It was a shrine, meticulously engineered for transformation. The Red Queen's bones are tucked in stone, her essence sealed in cinnabar, her legend fossilized in architecture. Her tomb doesn't shout, it hums with the certainty that she mattered. For the Maya, death was less a period than a semicolon, a pause before the soul plunged into Xibalba, the underworld. And let me tell you, Xibalba isn't the sort of afterlife spa you might hope for. It's a labyrinth of darkness, blood rivers and gods with far too many teeth. Only those properly buried, ritually armored, and spiritually savvy had a shot at making it through. The Red Queen's burial was a choreography of power and myth. She's cocooned in cinnabar, swaddled in stone, and surrounded by gifts, obsidian blades, bone needles. These weren't just grave goods, they're clues. Instruments of auto-sacrifice, perhaps tokens of rituals she performed to keep the cosmos spinning, or maybe tools meant to arm her spirit for the underworld's bureaucratic nightmare. Her jade mosaic mask wasn't just for show. In Maya belief, the face is a soul's passport. The gods demand recognition. No mask, no entry. Each tile was a fragment of immortality, an insurance policy against oblivion. Ceramic vessels clustered around her might have once brimmed with chocolate, maize gruel, water, or that ancient Maya favorite polka, because even in death you don't want to go thirsty. Stingray spines, shell trumpets, these are spiritual gadgets, ritual walkie-talkies to the gods, or perhaps just the ancient equivalent of emergency supplies. Burial, for the Maya, was a metamorphosis, not a farewell. Death as seed, burial as planting, afterlife as rebirth. Royals were more than mortals. They were avatars of the gods, destined to return to celestial origins. The Red Queen, lacquered in the red of life and sacrifice, wasn't being laid to rest. She was being rebooted as something timeless, a cog in the sacred machinery of the universe. But here's where things get cosmically interesting. Just a few paces away, Pakal the Great slumbers in his own stone cocoon, surrounded by the grandeur and iconography of a king. His tomb is an opera of power, but the Red Queen's is a whisper, a secret so well kept that even the looters never found her. Their proximity is no accident. In a city where every stone was a star chart, planting the Red Queen right next to Pakal is a statement, not just consort but cosmic counterpart. Scholars whisper her name, Tzakbu Ajau, Pakal's queen, his equal in spirit if not in inscription. Their burials are mirror images, both swaddled in cinnabar, both crowned with jade, both entombed in pyramids, both treated like living gods. Pakal's tomb shouts his journey through the underworld. The Red Queen's is all about the inward voyage. If Pakal is the sun, striding nightly through darkness to rise again, the Red Queen is his lunar twin, the moon shrouded in mystery, governing tides and secrets. The Maya didn't do solo acts. Cosmic balance demanded partnership. Masculine and feminine, sun and moon, king and queen, each orbiting the other. By placing the Red Queen beside Pakal, the Maya weren't just burying a marriage, they were fossilizing a duality that kept the cosmos from spinning off its axis. In death, as in life, she is not behind but beside him. Not an accessory but a force. Their tombs are a duet in stone, two souls wrapped in cinnabar and silence, humming across eternity, one of history's most sacred silences, if you ask me. The Red Queen's name may have faded, but her presence roars through time. Her tomb was sealed for over a millennium, yet her story refuses to stay put. She is a riddle that grows louder with every archaeological brushstroke, a reminder that sometimes the most important people are the ones history tries hardest to erase. No glyph spells out her name, no stele boast her deeds, yet every detail, the cinnabar, the jade, the architecture, declares her importance. She was more than a wife or a shadowy consort. She was a node of power, a woman of spiritual and political weight. She forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about Maya queens. The Red Queen is a standing rebuke to the idea that women in the ancient world were silent, powerless, or invisible. They led rituals, ran cities, shaped dynasties. Her re-emergence is a cosmic pattern interrupt, a queen stepping out of the shadows, demanding a second look. Her true legacy isn't the treasures she left behind, but the questions she sparked. Every jade bead, every cinnabar-stained rib, every architectural alignment is a message. This woman mattered, and the most tantalizing part, we still don't know the whole story. She teaches us that history isn't a box of dusty facts, but a living puzzle, a game of cosmic hide-and-seek between the past and the present. Her legacy is still unfolding, a crimson thread running through science, art, and wonder. The Red Queen lies wrapped in the color of blood and rebirth, her face once hidden by jade, now staring back at us through the lens of time. She is nameless, yet not voiceless, mysterious but stubbornly present. She may have ruled a kingdom in life, but in death she rules our imagination. Her tomb was locked in stone, her story written in silence, and yet she still speaks. And as her whispers fade, let me nudge you onward. Because while the Red Queen's legacy is one of cosmic riddles and sacred silences, the next chapter lands us in the thick of 20th century Mexico, where another woman, Frida Kahlo, will claw her way through pain and adversity to become a legend of her own. Frida Kahlo was born on July 6th in the vibrant district of Coyoacán. You arrive in Coyoacán. The air is thick with the scent of jacaranda blossoms and the distant, ever-present tang of street dust and horse manure. No air purifiers here, friend. Instead, you get the raw perfume of a Mexico City suburb that's still more village than metropolis. I've haunted this place since before the paint dried on the Casa Azul's cobalt walls. Even in death, the colors sing louder than the living. Step into the Casa Azul, the blue house, where every room seems to glow with secrets and contradictions. You're surrounded by walls the color of lapis lazuli, rooms crowded with folk art, Catholic icons, and a kitchen that smells perpetually of maize and old oil. No, there's no central heating. The floor tiles are colder than a bureaucrat's handshake. Here, Frida Kahlo is born, third of 4 daughters, to Guillermo Kahlo, a German-Hungarian photographer with a gaze sharp as a scalpel, and Matilde Calderón, a devout Catholic with indigenous and Spanish blood, and a heart wrapped in iron and rosaries. Guillermo, the father, is a man of quiet intellect, his camera his only confidant. Matildo, the mother, is stern, her faith a fortress. The household is a battleground of silence and ritual. Frida inherits her father's dark, observant eyes and his taste for solitude, but also her mother's unbreakable will, perfect for surviving a life that's about to get less poetic and more... As a child, you, Frida, are a force. Loud, imaginative, and brimming with questions that make grown-ups squirm. You read everything you can get your hands on, even the forbidden bits. You're not interested in dolls or embroidery. You want to know why the world is unfair, why you have to be quiet, why your legs don't work like everyone else's. The answer comes, as it always does, with pain. At 6, polio comes for you like a thief in the night. Your right leg shrivels, leaving it thin and weak, a constant reminder that the universe is not interested in symmetry. You spend months in bed staring at a ceiling that never changes, while the world outside spins on without you. The other children whisper and avoid you. No playdates, no TikTok, just isolation and the relentless tick of the clock. But you are not alone. Your father, Guillermo, becomes your companion. He encourages you to ride bicycles, to move, to use your mind as a refuge. He is the rare adult who sees you, not as a burden, but as a co-conspirator against the world's indifference. The two of you pedal through the streets, your skirts hiding your uneven leg, your spirit unbowed. You learn early, if life won't give you a seat at the table, steal the table. Unlike most girls in Coyoacan, you don't dream of marriage or motherhood. No, you want to be a doctor, a healer, not a caretaker. At 15, you bulldoze your way into the National Preparatory School in Mexico City, one of only 35 girls among 2,000 boys. The halls reek of ink, sweat, and the kind of ambition that gets people exiled. You stand out not just for your intelligence, but for your refusal to shrink. Your laugh is loud, your wit sharper than your father's camera lens. You join the Cachuchas, a gang of intellectual misfits who debate Marx and poetry, who smoke, swear, and sometimes stage political pranks. The air in the classroom is thick with chalk dust and revolution. You, in your tailored school uniform and rebellious grin, are already painting yourself into a world that doesn't know what to do with you. You are a living contradiction, a girl who wants to be a doctor, a child of Mexico and Europe, a survivor with a limp who moves faster than anyone else. But fate, as ever, is a vindictive bureaucrat. On September 17th, 1925, the calendar splits your life in two. The day starts with laughter and ends with blood. You board a rickety wooden bus after school with your boyfriend, Alejandro Gomez Arias. The city is loud, the roads chaotic, the air thick with anticipation, or maybe just exhaust. You argue, you flirt, you live as if nothing could ever stop you. Then, metal meets metal, the trolley car slams into the bus, and the world explodes into splinters and silence. I remember that crash, the shriek of metal, the screams, the sudden gutting hush. You are thrown, impaled by an iron handrail that enters your left hip and exits your pelvis. Your spine snaps in 3 places. Your right leg is pulverized, your foot twisted, your collarbone and ribs shattered, your shoulder is unmoored, your abdomen pierced. You are 18, a body broken on the altar of chance. If you're squeamish, don't worry, the pain was much worse in person. The street fills with chaos. A man covers your shivering form with his coat. Someone gasps. Your skin is shimmering, dusted in gold. Not a miracle, but a pouch of gold powder you were carrying, burst open on impact, glittering in the bloody sunlight. You look like a saint in agony, or a martyr dipped in Midas's tears. I've seen plenty of deaths, but few so theatrical. You're dragged to the Red Cross hospital past the gawking crowd and the stench of fear. Doctors descend, their hands cold and efficient, their faces set in lines of worry. Surgery after surgery, hours of anesthesia, weeks of infection. No morphine drips, just the dull ache of 1920s medicine and the relentless chorus of your own suffering. The dream of becoming a doctor vanishes, replaced by the reality of never walking without pain again. Flat on your back, entombed in a plaster cast, you stare at the ceiling. The world grows small, just you. The walls, the echo of footsteps in the corridor, and the omnipresent stink of disinfectant. If you're looking for privacy, forget it. Nurses barge in, family weeps, strangers peer at you like a sideshow. You are alone, except for the agony and the ghosts, myself included, who linger at the edges of your vision. But in this stillness, something stirs. Guillermo brings you brushes, Matilda rigs an easel above your bed, and a mirror is fixed overhead. You are forced to look at yourself, every day, every hour. You begin to paint, first out of boredom, then out of necessity. Your first subject is the only model available, your own battered face. It's not vanity, it's survival. Each stroke of the brush is an act of reclamation. You paint the pain, the fractures, the defiance. You paint because the world has forgotten you, and you refuse to be erased. Your paintings are small, painted on tin or wood, inspired by Mexican retablos, the devotional paintings that beg for miracles. But you are the miracle and the martyr, the artist and the wound. You paint yourself pierced by nails, floating in barren deserts, tethered to broken columns. You paint tears and blood, exposed spines and split bodies. There is nothing sanitized here. No polite landscapes, no pretty flowers. Your pain is raw, ugly and defiant. You dare anyone to look away. Your art is not just about you. It is a new language, a way to speak the unspeakable. You blend Mexican folk art, surrealism, anatomy, and the darkness that only comes from staring death in the face. Your canvases are dreamlike autopsies, autopsies of your soul, framed in colour and myth. When you finally walk again, it's with a limp and a cane, but with a new identity. You are no longer the girl who wanted to heal others. You are the woman who paints to heal herself. Your art is a weapon, a shield, a confession. You force the world to see what it would rather ignore, that suffering can be beautiful, and that survival is an act of rebellion. In this new life you meet Diego Rivera, a man as large in legend as in flesh, 20 years your senior, already Mexico's most famous muralist. Diego is a force of nature. You bring him your paintings, challenge him to judge your talent. He looks and he sees you. Not just another wounded soul, but an artist with a voice as sharp as obsidian. He tells you, yes, you have talent, not out of pity, but because he knows genius when it limps into the room. You and Diego ignite. He is massive, unfaithful, and politically volcanic. You are sharp-tongued, fiercely independent, and already walking wounded. Your parents call it a marriage between an elephant and a dove. You call it survival. You marry, and the world watches, scandalized and fascinated. You are not peaceful, but you are legendary. Diego supports your art, even as he betrays your heart. You take lovers of your own, men, women, artists, revolutionaries. You are not interested in playing the victim. When Diego strays with your own sister, you break, then remake yourself, setting new terms, autonomy, home, money, name. You divorce, remarry, and redefine what it means to be a wife and an artist in a world that wants you to be neither. The two of you travel north to San Francisco, Detroit, New York. The air in America is thick with money and the stench of hypocrisy. You mock their materialism in letters home, longing for the grit, colour and contradiction of Mexico. While Diego paints murals for the rich, you paint your own revolutions, small, intimate, bleeding with truth. Your health is never stable. Pain is your constant companion, and after a failed pregnancy in Detroit, your art turns even more inward. You paint yourself lying on a hospital bed, surrounded by symbols of loss. A fetus, a snail, medical instruments, a cracked pelvis. The canvas weeps with you. It is not pretty. It is not polite. It is real. Back in Mexico, you dive into politics. You and Diego welcome Leon Trotsky into your home. You wear Tijuana dresses, not as costume but as a political statement, a declaration of indigenous pride, defiance and solidarity. Your art, your body, your ideology, they are all one, stitched together by pain and resistance. While Diego paints the revolution on public walls, you paint its cost on your own skin, the body in pieces, the mind aflame, the self staring back unblinking. You are a painter of pain, but also of survival. You force the world to witness what it would rather forget, that to endure is to resist, and to create is to transcend. You wouldn't survive a day in Frida's world. No antibiotics, no privacy, no hope of escape. But she did, and in doing so she transformed her suffering into art that refuses to die. And as I drift through these rooms, century after century, I see her legacy growing, each painting a beacon for every soul who's ever been broken and refused to stay quiet. But Frida's story doesn't end here, entombed in pain and pigment. When she returns to Mexico in the late 1930s, she is no longer just Diego Rivera's wife. She is an icon, an artist whose pain has become her immortality. But that, dear viewer, is a chapter for another haunting. So here we are, drifting back through the blue gates of Casa Azul in the late 1940s, a place I've haunted more times than I'd care to count. You, trailing behind, step off the battered Mexico City street and into Frida Kahlo's domain. No, it's not just a house. It's a riotous living altar to defiance. Cobalt walls so bright they'd sear your retinas, yellow window trim, Aztec idols glaring from the garden, parrots shriek overhead, monkeys dangle from the rafters, and somewhere incense coils through the air like a ghost that actually enjoys being here. Frida isn't the shadow of Diego Rivera anymore. She's become a living contradiction, a force, not a footnote. The floor is scattered with folk art, revolutionary pamphlets, and pre-Columbian relics. You can practically trip over a protest banner or a monkey at any moment. Frida herself glides through the chaos, hair braided and crowned with flowers, her dress a thunderclap of indigenous pride. She paints, even as pain gnaws her bones, the air thick with copal and mariachi drifting in from the street. This is her sanctuary, her creative crucible. It's also a place where suffering is never out of sight. Corsets hang like medieval torture devices, medicine bottles crowd the shelves, and the bed is always within arm's reach. Yet from this pain, Frida's art erupts with new force. The paintings grow sharper, more symbolic, more unflinchingly political. She paints herself as two women, one heart exposed and bleeding, the other armored in tradition. It's autobiography as battlefield, love and loss and Mexico itself bleeding onto the canvas. In Paris, even Picasso and Breton bow to her originality. She's invited to dine with the surrealists, but Frida, ever the contrarian, bites back. They thought I was a surrealist, she scoffs, but I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality. I've heard 1,000 artists try to claim a movement. Frida spits them out and claims herself. Her Mexico is no postcard fantasy. Her brush carves skeletons, fawns, corn and hummingbirds into the truth of a country born from beauty and brutality alike. But let's not romanticize this. As her art grows teeth, her body crumbles. Dozens of surgeries, infections that would make a medieval barber blanch. Her spine is buckling, her right leg a battlefield of infection. She's pinned, casted, and stretched in contraptions that look more like instruments of the Inquisition than medicine. And yet she paints, lying in bed, torso locked in a corset, fingers curled around a brush as if it's the only weapon she has left. Each canvas becomes a duel with agony. She paints with a clarity honed by pain, no more hiding behind metaphor. In the broken column she splits herself down the middle, nails piercing her skin, an ancient column holding up what remains of her spine. Her face is stone, her gaze defiant. Pain, for Frida, isn't just a theme, it's the air she breathes, the adversary she refuses to let win. Her politics, too, sharpen in the crucible. Frida joins the Communist Party, writes blistering letters, and marches in the streets. When her legs fail her, she wheels herself into protests, fist raised, shouting slogans until her voice is raw. She will not be silenced by pain, by patriarchy, or by the polite expectations of art critics who'd rather see her quiet. Mexico finally gives her a solo exhibition about time, you might mutter, but her doctors say she's too fragile to attend, so naturally Frida arrives by ambulance. Carried in on a stretcher, she's placed in the middle of the gallery, hospital bed and all. She greets the crowd with tequila and irreverent laughter, her hair blazing with flowers, her eyes still burning with that unkillable fire. Even now, she refuses to be sidelined. Her last paintings are both childlike and devastating. In Marxism Will Give Health to the Sick, she cradles herself in a steel corset, Marx's hands supporting her, while capitalist vultures scatter. Her final work, a still life of watermelons, one wedge inscribed with Viva la Vida, long live life. Even with death breathing down her neck, she declares herself alive, political and joyful. Frida's last self-portraits aren't just images, they're declarations of war. They're what happens when suffering is transformed, not into tragedy, but into something sacred and unflinching. Each brushstroke is a refusal to disappear. July 13th, 1954. Frida Kahlo dies in the same house where she was born. Officially, it's a pulmonary embolism. Unofficially, her friends whisper of exhaustion, pain, too many surgeries, too many battles. Just days before, she'd attended a protest against the CIA coup in Guatemala, wheeled along, fist raised, voice fierce, revolution to the very end. Her last diary entry is a dagger wrapped in silk. I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return. Her funeral is held at the Palacio de Bellas Artes, Mexico's most hallowed hall. Her body, draped in the red communist flag, is watched over by a parade of friends, revolutionaries and artists. Diego Rivera, the man who broke her heart more than once, is inconsolable. He calls her the love of his life, even as her legacy is already beginning to outgrow him. But here's the twist you probably didn't see coming. Even with me as your ghostly guide, Frida refuses to fade away. At first, her name lingers in art circles. She's too political for the surrealists, too strange for the traditionalists. But slowly her story, her image, her relentless defiance spreads. Through the 1960s and 70s, as feminists and radicals reclaim lost voices, Frida's name grows louder and louder. She becomes more than a painter. She's a symbol of pain turned into power, of feminism born from resistance, of Mexican identity without apology, of queerness and disability and unfiltered authenticity. Her face, with its unibrow and flower crown, becomes iconic. Her home is transformed into a museum, her diary a sacred relic. Her paintings, once dismissed as too odd or too personal, now hang in the world's most prestigious galleries. Frida spent much of her life eclipsed by Diego's shadow, but in death she steps forward into the light. She leaves behind more than art. She leaves behind a mirror, daring us to look, not with pity, but with fire in our eyes. Today, Frida's face is everywhere. T-shirts, murals, dolls, memes. Her image is as omnipresent as any pop star, but with a gravity that can't be mass-produced. What matters isn't that people recognize her face, it's that they recognize the truth behind it. Frida never tried to be flawless. She never fit in a box. She didn't care to. In a world that demands perfection, she gave us the messy, vibrant, contradictory realness of a soul refusing to be tamed. She claimed what made her different, her disability, her queerness, her politics, her heritage, and turned it into art that skips across borders and decades. She's not just an artist anymore. She's a symbol of defiance, of feminism, of creative resistance. For queer communities, she's a fearless icon who lived openly when silence was the rule. For women, she's proof that power asks for no permission. For disabled artists, she's the living argument that pain can be a catalyst, not a cage. For Mexico, she's a daughter, reclaimed, fierce, folkloric, forever woven into the national soul. Her paintings, once considered too strange or raw, are now revered. Works like the two Fridas, Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird, and The Broken Column, aren't just looked at, they're felt, deep in the bones by anyone who's ever needed to turn suffering into something sacred. Frida lived in the margins and dragged them into the center. She was contradiction incarnate, a communist in gold jewelry, a betrayed woman who loved again, a body in pieces with a soul that wouldn't break. Through it all she painted, not just with color, but with conviction. She never asked to be anyone's symbol. She just told the truth about herself. And in doing so, she told the truth for millions who'd never seen themselves reflected in art. Now, when you see her face, you see courage, color, resistance. You see Frida, not gone, but immortal.